Well, hello, this is Jeff Gaudiosi, and you're on MisplacedStraws.com, where music comes to life. And my guest today really has one of the most distinct voices in rock. Along with his band White Lion, he's written and recorded some of the most memorable songs of the 80s. He's now re recorded and reimagined some of those hits in a collection called Songs of White Lion. Please welcome Mike Tramp. Welcome, Mike.
Thank you very much. Kind introduction. Thank you.
So, Songs of White Lion, it consists of modern 2023 versions of the band's hits. What led you to go back and re-record these songs?
And of course, staying as close to the originals
Mhm.
as possible. So the thing is, this has been a long journey. I mean, White Lion. I ended White Lion in '91. My own band. I closed the door on that, and once I made that decision, it was about that I was ready to move on.
Mm.
Now there's many different reasons why it happened, but at the end, it had also a lot to do with that in reality, the 80s were done and record company were looking for the new step and thing. It's like it was like you were in a room where suddenly you felt uninvited.
Mhm.
I took a lot of that upon myself as almost like a personal insult. I mean, I'm not going to get that sensitive, but and then you added, that the band had basically just split in half only recently before that when James Lomenzo and Greg Danzer, the rhythm section, had left the band. And even though Vito and I didn't necessarily feel hurt about it, we found two new guys. We felt a burst of energy, and we were ready to do that. Things like that leaves a big impact, and we had done a little bit of American tour to try out the new guys, and when we came in to play New York City in the end of August '91, none of the record companies showed up for the sold out show, and that's all. This is a place where everything started for us. This was our hometown, so all that stuff putting in. Once I then went solo. First, I had a band called Freak of Nature with three albums, and then after that, I went solo. Everywhere I went in the world, the White Lion sticker got slapped on my back,
Mhm.
and I was under the impression that ending something meaning ending something, and the new musical journeys that I did, but both with Freak of Nature and then my solo career that now, which is up to date, have done 13 solo albums. It was clear for me I'm onto something new,
Mhm.
but it just seemed like someone, and it wasn't the world, but someone just simply didn't want me to just move on as a songwriter, as an artist, and stuff like that. Obviously, I fought that, but my solo career never really took off.
Mhm.
I kept writing the songs, and I've written and recorded 13 consistent solo albums, which clearly shows who Mike Tramp is as a solo artist. And then I've been called and pushed into this White Lion adventure once before, from 2005 to 2009, that I even went out at the end to record an album, which I did under the White Lion banner called Return of the Pride, but at the same time had nothing to do with White Lion.
Mm.
It was just a big bowl of confusion. And then I let go of that, and then it was back on the solo career, album after album, tour after tour, just playing the clubs or small theaters and stuff like that. Then I started introducing, a bit of some White Lion songs at the request of promoters. But the thing is that my solo band is like a Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers.
Yeah.
They're not an 80s band.
Mhm.
If I don't want that sound or that way of thinking or that way of playing into that band. So I was never comfortable whenever we did a new interpretation of a White Lion song. I always felt that White Lion had its own place. and it belonged on those 4 albums, and it belonged in the memories from 83 to 91. But finally, that's simply couldn't take it no more. I had to explore it maximum to how I could do this if I was going to do that.
Yeah.
And I'm not 26 anymore. I'm actually the opposite. I'm 62 years old. So I wanted to see if the guitar player I was working with, if he could interpret Vito Bratta's guitar parts, which are important as my vocal and my melody to the sound of White Lion, in a different key, which I would have to sing for me to fit into today's world and my age and everything, the whole persona. And after a while, he came back and says, you know what? The songs you have chosen, I think I got them down. And we started recording them. And once I started singing them, I really felt joy. I really, really felt joy of singing them for the first time since I was in White Lion. And that had a lot to do that, it had a long enough period for them to rest, but also that I'd found that I could represent the songs in 2023 because I couldn't go out and do an album which sounded like, the last breath of a dying artist. It had to be something that had a certain, you kind of introduced it in a nice way, both refreshing, modern, but at the same time, keeping as much of the original versions as possible, because I don't want to change songs like Wait and Little Fighter and Tell Me, but I wanted them to sound like they were fresh and new, and the combination of the key that I'm singing in, and obviously just the band playing songs which are legendary and sort of etched in stone, gave a nice combination that even I said, wow, I'm actually excited about this.
And who joined you? Who's in your band playing on this record?
Well, I mean, besides Marcus Nand, the guitar player who's in LA, I used 2 of my friends in Denmark where I am, trusted guys who have been out with me playing some of these White Lion songs before, stuff like that. So I wanted to create a familiar, like a friendly barbecue in the studio. I wanted all that stuff to get into the groove of this production, that it oozed of comfortable surroundings and everything like that. So you mentioned before you'd kind of been along for the ride since the beginning and stuff like that. So you could easily say to me, I don't need another version of Pride. I already got the original one. But I'm almost positive, unless you're somebody on Facebook who simply just have to make a comment, that most people will feel that this trip back in a different car is actually okay.
Yeah. It feels like, because we've grown with you over the last 40 years, and this feels like a grown-up version of those songs, almost like now that we're all adults. And I go back, one of my favorite solo records of yours was Cobblestone Streets, and this kind of reminds me of the feel of that. It's, I guess the best way I could put it is, more adult versions of the songs we loved in our youth.
I mean, I obviously really, really appreciate you saying that. It's genuine what you say, and of course also because not just the praise of my albums, but also that I completely connect to what you just said, because that is the overall thing. A lot of fans who have come to my solo shows over the last 10 years when I've toured the US with an acoustic guitar have said similar things. We come here because we saw you in White Lion, and that's when we became fans. But growing with your solo albums have made the journey worth. Now I come here with my wife, what I met when you supported AC/DC in Omaha, and Wait is our song. And then when we started hearing you as an artist with the solo albums, it was almost like the journey continued. It's like, once Captain Kirk left Star Trek, the journey still
Yeah.
continued. It was different, but it was still the Enterprise.
Yeah.
There were still all those familiar things that had to be along, because I am 35 years older, and I wanted it to sound like I was 35 years older, probably about more in the experience and the understanding of the journey that the White Lion songs have taken with me as both as a passenger, but also as a driver.
And now, kind of looking back a little, so much has been written and talked about the end of White Lion. But let's go back to the beginning. You had success in Denmark with some bands, and that brought you over to New York. But what was that meeting with Vito where the two of you realized that you had a musical connection? How did that take place?
Well, I mean, it's kind of like love at first sight. You simply will not be able to find the words. Um, once I, once I had, I had met Vito at our final show with the Danish band, which we call Lion, when we came to New York, and Vito's band Dreamer were playing there, and we met in the dressing room, and once I started seeing him playing, I was a completely in awe. I thought my band was great, and suddenly I saw someone like, wow, gotta be kidding. This is the guy I need to play with. And shortly after we'd gone back to Denmark and I came back to America and New York and America, of course. And Vito was the first one I contacted. And he had a band at that time, but he brought over the rhythm section and we bullshitted each other and stuff like that. And we started then forming sort of like an early version of the band, which we took on the name Lion from me, and we started playing all my songs. And after a very short time, it fell apart, but Vito and I stayed together. And then he says, "I'm going to come over to where I was living in Queens," and he was living in Staten Island. Says, "I'm going to come over," and we set up that night and wrote Broken Heart and the Road to Valhalla. It became the night when White Lion was born, and not a lot of words was spoken. It was just really two guitars that met in the room, and the music did all the talking. And from that moment on, Vito and I never spoke about music. We just wrote songs. We are so one person when it came to writing the music and what White Lion was. There were never ever a debate or question about what the band was. On the outside, in our private lives, we were heaven and hell, black and white. We had two different philosophies, but Vito always said, "Well, what does that matter? As a band, as a songwriting team, we work, and there's no questions there." And I can only agree with him. He never became the friend that I wanted him to be outside, that we could do a lot of stuff together. And maybe in reality, because we were like that, maybe that also became the magic when we wrote the music together. The being apart in the waking hours of the day and stuff like that, and only at night when we got together for writing the songs. I mean, we also wrote songs daylight. It's not that, but it's just sort of a metaphor in that when we got together, it was electricity, and we didn't need to explain and stuff like that. We just wrote. And we wrote the songs very quickly. We instantly got to the point. I never said, "Oh, I don't like where you're going there." I just started singing.
And that really comes across on those classic songs, that you guys had that musical connection that you don't find very often. But kind of looking back now, I mean, you see some bands, they came up as kids together and had this personal bond as well. And among the four members of White Lion, it doesn't seem, as you just said, that was ever there. Was always the musical connection. Do you think that that's one of the things that may have led to the end of the band, was that you didn't have that personal connection? So when music began to change and things started to get a little rough for, bands of your era, there really wasn't that bond to hold you together?
Well, there are also a lot of bands that grew up as kids
Yeah.
together and ended up in court.
Yeah. Mhm.
You
Yeah.
you know what? I mean, I have had this conversation with Vito many times.
Mhm.
And obviously, we've had to gone through some legal papers at times. The friendship that I have with James Lomenzo, the bass player, a true brother friendship.
Mhm.
And only for a short time after they departed of White Lion did that sort of just fade away. But
Mhm.
we very quickly rekindled that because
Yeah.
James were exactly what Vito wasn't to me. He were the friend, and him and I were painting houses and
Mhm.
and just surviving and stuff like that. And he's 100% like me. And through his career with Megadeth and John Fogerty and stuff
Mhm.
like that, anytime he's come to where I played, we've always been together and stuff like that. But there are more than one factor involved in how a band breaks up. Obviously, Vito and I are the songwriters, and Vito in reality was not really interested in writing any songs with the rest of the band.
Mhm.
Now, without any offending anyone, Vito said to me probably within the last 2 months when we talked, they always used to complain about they never got to write any songs. Now, 35 years later, where are their songs? And I didn't engage in that conversation, but I know where he
Yeah.
came from. And
Mhm.
he simply just what's wrong with this machine?
Mhm.
This machine is putting gas in the car. This machine is bringing us to the big stage and stuff like that, and so on. So, and at the end, there needed to be some financial negotiation and stuff like that. And even though I don't know the true story at that moment, even though I'm 50% of what White Lion was, it just ended up,
Yeah.
that, well, then we're gonna leave the band, and then, that and I guess in reality, Vito felt quite comfortable or cocky, and of course, at that moment, I stood by my songwrite
Mhm.
partner and so on. So, and all right, we'll show them, and then you
Yeah.
get two new guys and stuff like that. It's similar to every other band and stuff like that. And then shortly after, you start realizing, that a band has a moment, and
Mhm.
that you can't create that even if you get two players that are sort of technical better
Mhm.
or have better hair or whatever. There's only one original band.
Yeah. And so this record, Songs of White Lion, is out on April 14th. You're doing a month-long tour in May through the US, including a date at 89 North in Long Island on May 3rd. Going forward, as you go through the cycle of this record, what's next for Mike Tramp? I mean, do you have any interest in putting an all-star band kind of project together? Are you going to go back to doing some of your solo records? What do you see coming up for you?
Show me the money. You know what? The thing is that prior to doing um the Songs of White Line album, I'm always sort of floating around, but here are the facts, and I say that both with pride and
Mhm.
just with reality.
Mhm.
That thing is that I songwriting comes very easily to me, but there also has to be a reason why you go in and record an album. Sales of physical albums, which which is what I do. I'm not necessarily a big streaming artist. My
Mhm.
fans are people that buy vinyl and CDs and
Mhm.
stuff like
Yep.
that. The Songs of White Lion is a chapter where I see that being a live concert. I
Mhm.
mean, it's basically, to me, the album is probably to me more a concert poster, a
Mhm.
business card for live performance than it really is for me an album.
Yeah.
And so it basically just clearly says Mike Tramp's Songs of White Lion, well, that's what he's going to be play. And it eventually could evolve with a larger set list, which doesn't just include the songs from the album and so on. So so when you say, yeah, I could definitely do something, but the thing is, like, putting an all-star band together or even finding those guys, and you know, there's no budget for a record, there's no budget for a tour going out there. So you mentioned, I mean, I have for the last 10 years toured America 7 times by myself with an acoustic guitar and a rental car, because nothing else is possible. Now I've moved it up that on the May tour, I'm touring together with Marcus Nan, the guitar player. We're both playing electric guitars, and we have a bass and drum loop behind us. So you're basically going to get the feeling of Songs of White Lion. And we couldn't do this with a full band. I mean, I'm doing 22 shows in the month of May, which is, there are no bands from my time besides Motley Crue that are doing more than, you know, 1 show a week and stuff like that. So it has been all about, you know, adapting, adjusting, improvising to the changing situation, because the finances isn't there in the venues and stuff like that. You know, the competition is hard. You know, Kiss has drained rock and roll for its money, and you know, now the rest of us have to pay for a 6-pack of beer or something like that.
Well, we've been spending some time here with Mike Tramp. Again, the record is called Songs of White Lion. It's out everywhere April 14th. He's hitting the road through the month of May. Mike, best of luck with the record and tour. Thank you so much for taking some time to do this. It's been a pleasure getting to speak with you.
It's my pleasure. I'm just pleased that that on the way to, you know, to mail your tax return, you can pick up. Yeah. It's been a pleasure. I'm just happy that, you know, that there have been a lot of kind people along my journey that have supported me with kind words, showing up at my club shows, praising my solo albums, now ready for this. And you know what? I like this little family.
We do too. Thank you a lot, my friend. We'll talk soon.
Pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you.